What's up guys? Welcome back sa ating channel. Again, this is your math teacher, Sir Gaor. Ready na po ba tayong matuto ng isang panibagong math lesson? Kung ready na, today we will be discussing writing conditional statements. So this is another chapter under reasoning and proof. Okay? So this is still under our most essential learning competencies. So kung sa tingin nyo meron kayong natutunan sa ating panibagong lesson, you may like the video, comment in the comment section, and sa mga hindi pa subscribers, please subscribe. Here are the objectives of today's lesson. Determine the relationship between the hypothesis and conclusion of an if-then statement. And transform a statement into an equivalent if-then statement. Okay, so let's have our drill. Our drill is simply true or false. So write true if the statement is correct, otherwise write false. Good luck! If you are done, let us now check your answers. For number 1, complementary angles are acute angles. The answer is true. The definition of complementary angles is two angles that will sum up to 90 degrees. Okay, so dapat ang total nila ay 90 degrees. So for sure, parehas na silang acute angles. Number 2, if an obtuse angle is bisected, then two acute angles are obtained. The answer is, it's true. Okay, so it's an obtuse angle, bisected daw. So, ibig sabihin ng bisected, hinati sa dalawa ng pantay. So, pag hinati natin yun, an obtuse angle is less than 180 degrees, but greater than 90 degrees. So, pag hinati yun, for sure, na ang sagot natin palagi ay in between 90 and 0. So, siguradong acute angles ang lalabas. Number 3, if a polygon is a quadrilateral, then it is a rectangle. The answer is a false. Okay, it's false because pwede naman tayong magkaroon ng quadrilateral pero hindi rectangle. What about square? What about rhombus? What about trapezoid, kite? So marami pa. Hindi lang po rectangle ang quadrilateral. Number 4, whole numbers are positive integers. The correct answer is false. Example ng whole numbers or the whole numbers are, the set of whole numbers are 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, etc. and so on in that pattern. So, binanggit ko rin yung 0. So, 0 is a whole number but it is not a positive integer. So, that's why it's a false. For number 5, if 2k is an even integer, then 2k plus 1 is an odd integer. The correct answer is, it is true. Okay, so even na yung integer mo na 2k, so whatever it is, plus 1, so alternating naman sila. So even and then add, then even and then add. So therefore, the correct answer is, it's a true statement. I hope you got a perfect score of 5. Pero kung hindi, paki-review po yung mga sinabi ko about sa details natin for this drill. Before we proceed to conditional statements or yung if-then statements, let's have first some preliminary definition of terms. No? We are under reasoning and proof topic or chapter. So let's have some definition of terms. Let's have first inductive reasoning. Inductive reasoning refers to the considerations and analysis made after several specific situations and patterns are arrived at a conjecture. So, ang inductive reasoning daw ay pagre-reason after magkaroon ng consideration tapos ng analysis. Okay? What about a conjecture? So, ano ba yung sinabing conjecture? Conjecture is an educated guess. So, hula siya. Hula lang yung conjecture pero educated naman. So, pinag-isipan. Okay? A conjecture may be true or false. No? Conjecture is may be true or false. Examples of conjecture. Letter A, yung mga binanggit natin kanina doon sa, yung mga questions doon sa ating drill kanina, lahat sila ay conjectures. So, pwedeng true, pwedeng false. Letter A, complementary angles are acute angles. So, it is an example of a true conjecture. And for letter B, whole numbers are positive integers. It's also a conjecture but a false conjecture. Conjecture is an educated guess. Number 3, counterexample. So what is a counterexample? It is a false example that shows that a conjecture is not true. So siya yung nagpapatunay na yung conjecture ay hindi true. So counterexample based dun sa term na. Okay, examples. For letter A, yung sinabi natin kanina, complementary angles are acute angles. This is a true statement or a true conjecture. So therefore, our counterexample is none. So wala tayong mabibigay na counterexample kasi true nga siya, no? Since the given conjecture is a true statement. Pag true siya, wala kang kahit anong isip mo ng counterexample, wala kang mabibigay kasi nga tama talaga siya, no? For letter B, whole numbers are positive integers. So the conjecture is, or the counterexample rather, is 0. So 0 is a counterexample for this statement. Sabi ko raw kasi, lahat daw ng whole numbers ay positive integers. What about 0? 0 is an element of the set of whole numbers, but it is not a positive integer. So that is an example of counterexample. So kukontrahin mo yung nandun sa conjecture. Magbibigay ka ng false example. Pag nakapagbigay ka, that is a counterexample. Kapag hindi ka nakapagbigay, therefore there is no counterexample and the conjecture is true. Let us now proceed to our first lesson, which is conditional statement or if-then statement. So ano ba tong conditional statement or yung if-then statement? A conditional statement is a compound statement of the form if P then Q, where P and Q are statements. So may dalawang statements tapos pinagsama. The first statement, P, is called the hypothesis. Hypothesis pala yung P, and usually begins with if. So pagkatapos ng word na if, palagi hypothesis ang meron. While the second statement, Q, usually begins with then, is called the conclusion. So again, pagkatapos ng word na if, we have the hypothesis. Pagkatapos ng word na then, we have the conclusion. To write a statement in an if-then form, identify the hypothesis and the conclusion from the given statement. So, syempre, kung makakasulat tayo or kung susulat tayo ng if-then statement, dapat alam natin yung hypothesis at saka yung conclusion. Let us relate this topic, this conditional statement topic or yung if-then statement to other learning areas. So, pinag-aaralan din ito sa ibang subject, no? Sa iba't ibang subjects. So, here are some examples. In English, yun yung cause and effect. While in Filipino, or sometimes in AP rin, no? Sanhi at bunga. So, yung sanhi at bunga. While in mathematics, hypothesis or if, and then conclusion, which is then. So, related po sila. So, para lang siyang cause, effect, or sanhi bunga, no? So, yung if natin, yung hypothesis natin, it's the cause, while the conclusion is yung effect. Let's now learn how to identify hypothesis and conclusion. Please take note that the word if is not part of the hypothesis, and the word then is not part of the conclusion. So, yung if at saka then ay hindi talaga parte ng hypothesis and conclusion. Sila lang yung nagbibigay ng go signal, sila lang yung nagbibigay ng signal na si if po ay ang ating hypothesis, or pagkatapos ni if, meron tayong hypothesis, tapos pagkatapos ni then, meron tayong conclusion. But they are not part of it. Okay, so examples. Number 1, if a number is less than 0, then the number is negative. Okay, so kapag nakabasa tayo ng if then, madali na lang makita. So this is the if. So for sure, after the word if, we have the hypothesis. So dapat ito ang ating magiging hypothesis. A number is less than 0. The proper way of writing hypothesis and conclusion is by writing them in a sentence. Pero dapat in a way na hindi magbabago yung to, yung pinaka sinasabi doon sa yung sa sinasabi doon sa previous statement. So dapat hindi siya mababago. Now, pwede tayong mag-rearrange, pwede tayong magdagdag, pero yung idadagdag natin, make sure hindi magpapabago ng statement. A number is less than 0. So, pwede siyang maging sentence. A number is less than 0 is a sentence. Again, the proper way of writing hypothesis and conclusion is by making them a sentence. Okay, then the next one, conclusion, we have the word then. Okay, then the number is negative. So, the number is negative. This one, the number is negative is our conclusion. Pwede ba siya maging sentence? Kaya. The number is negative. So, therefore, our hypothesis is a number is less than 0 and our conclusion is the number is negative. Okay, next. Number 2, Ronald will pass his quiz if he will read his notes. Let's identify the hypothesis. Nandito natin nabasa si if. So, therefore, ito ang ating notes. Ang ating hypothesis. So, he will read his notes. So, sino ba yung he na tinutukoy? Yung subject nun ay si Ronald. So, para tayong nag-aaral ng English dito, no? Ang subject nun ay si Ronald. So, therefore, Ronald will read his notes. Yung ating hypothesis. Pwede naman nating sabihin he, kaya lang medyo magulo sino yung tinutukoy na he dyan, no? So dapat sana ay hindi tayo gumagamit ng mga pronouns. So kung merong subject na binigay, yung pangalan mismo ng subject. So that is Ronald. So Ronald will read his notes. That is the hypothesis. For our conclusion, of course, the other side, Ronald will pass his quiz. So, therefore, this is considered as a sentence. So, therefore, that is our conclusion. So, the hypothesis, Ronald will read his notes. Ronald will pass his quiz. Kapag nagbasa siya ng notes, papasa siya sa quiz. Let's have number 3. The COVID-19 virus spreads slowly because the people practice social distancing. So, wala tayong nabasang if at saka then. So, let's try to identify the hypothesis or yung cause. Ang cause ba ay yung the COVID-19 virus spreads slowly? Or ang cause ay yung people practice social distancing? So, ano kaya ang cause sa dalawa? Of course, ang cause natin dyan or ang hypothesis natin dyan ay yung people practice social distancing. Dahil nag-social distancing yung mga tao, ang naging effect natin or ang conclusion natin, the COVID-19 virus spreads slowly. So again, they must be written in sentence. Number 4, regular polygons are equilateral. Hypothesis, so we have only regular polygons. So, in this case, meron lang tayong regular polygons. Tsaka meron din tayong equilateral. So, paano kaya ito magagawang hypothesis? Okay, so sabi ko kanina, pwede nating baguhin ng konti, pero nandun pa rin dapat yung thought. Hindi naman basta kukuha ka ng hypothesis, kukopyahin mo na yung nandun, tapos lalagyan mo na dyan. So, therefore, dapat naka-sentence siya, at the same pa rin yung thought. Okay, for regular polygons, wala namang sinabi, kaya nilagyan natin dito ng any regular polygon. Tapos, yung polygon, we all know that polygons are figure. So, therefore, we can say that the hypothesis is the figure is any regular polygon. So, kahit na anong regular polygon, yung figure. Okay, so I hope you get that one. So, ganun po ang paglalagay ng hypothesis at saka ng conclusion. Yung conclusion naman natin, etong equilateral lang. So, paano natin ito malalagay into sentence na related pa rin dyan? The figure has equilateral sides. So, yung tinutukoy na figure, which is the regular polygon, pero hindi natin sasabihin na regular polygon kasi sinabi natin siya sa hypothesis. Okay. So, the figure has equilateral sides. So, therefore, it's our conclusion. So, that is how to write hypothesis and conclusion. So remember, you have to write them in complete sentence. So let us now discuss how to transform a statement into an if-then statement. So, yung equivalent if-then statement niya. To transform a statement in an if-then statement form, the first one is to identify the hypothesis and the conclusion of the given statement. So, dapat alam muna natin yung lesson kanina, yung paano mag-identify ng hypothesis at conclusion. Kasi kung hindi natin alam i-identify yun, so hindi natin ito magagawa. So, dapat nakasulat din siya in sentences para mas madali na tayong mag-transform sa if-then. Then, after identifying the hypothesis and conclusion, write the hypothesis after the word if. So, kitang-kita rito sa yung term natin, no? If, tapos nakakapital yung I kasi mauuna siya eh. So, siya yung first letter ng sentence, kaya capital palagi yung I dyan. And then, pag meron ka ng if, tapos meron ka ng hypothesis na nakasulat, write a comma, and then afterwards, write the conclusion after the word then. So, yung then naman ang isusulat. Pagkatapos masulat mo yung then, isulat mo na ang conclusion. Let's now have some examples. Number 1, angles with the same measure are congruent. So, what do you think is our hypothesis? The hypothesis is the angles have the same measure. So, itong part na to, ito po ang ating hypothesis. While this one is our conclusion, congruent. So, remember, we are talking about the angles. The angles are congruent. Sinabi yung angle, pero hindi na sinabi yung same measure. No? So, the angles are congruent. So, therefore, those are the hypothesis and conclusion. So, paano naman siya sulat sa if-then? So, since meron na tayong hypothesis and conclusion, madali na nating ma-identify yung if-then niya. So, naisip niyo na po ba kung paano yung if-then? If the angles have the same measure, yan na yung if na word term na natin, tapos yung hypothesis, then, they are congruent. Ito, pwede na tayong gumamit ng pronoun. So, they are congruent. Hindi na natin babanggitin ulit yung angles. Okay? So, ganun po ang pagta-transform. So, kailangan, kaya nating i-rephrase yung hypothesis pati yung conclusion ng tama. Make sure na mailalagay siya into sentence para hindi mahirapan sa pagta-transform ng if-then statement. Okay, so the answer is, if the angles have the same measure, then they are congruent. Let's have the second example. I'll buy a new pair of shoes if I get my bonus. So, what do you think is our hypothesis? May if na tayo rito, so may clue na tayo. So, the hypothesis is, I get my bonus. Yung I get my bonus, sentence na siya, no? And then, for the conclusion, I'll buy a new pair of shoes. So, madali lang ito. Wala na halos or wala nang binago. So, if then na natin siya. If I get my bonus, I'll buy a new pair of shoes. So, therefore, that is our if-then statement. More examples. Number 3. The square of any real number is positive. The square of any real number is positive. So, what do you think is our hypothesis? So, usually, pinaghihiwalay sila sa yung hypothesis, conclusion, pinaghihiwalay ng linking verbs. Yung is, are, was, were, will be, or yung helping verbs. So, yun yung is. So, itong nasa left side natin, ito ang ating hypothesis. The square of any real number. So, a real number is squared. Kasi pag binasa natin na the square of any real number, it's not a sentence. Pag sinulat lang natin na ganun. So, remember, they have to be written in a sentence. The square of any real number is not a sentence. So, hindi complete yung kanyang thought. So, pwede nating sabihin, pwede natin siyang i-rephrase as, a real number is squared. So, that is a sentence. A real number is squared. So, in-square daw yung real number. And for our conclusion, paano natin ito magagawa? Positive. The square is a positive. So, yung pagkaka-square niya raw, no, the square is a positive. Yung pagkaka-square ng real number ay positive. Therefore, that is our conclusion. Okay, so in if then, If any real number is squared, then the square is positive. Okay, so I hope nakuha nyo po yon. For our last example, perpendicular lines form right angles. So perpendicular lines form right angles. Hypothesis, the lines are perpendicular. So yung ating hypothesis ay itong nasa una. Yan. Form right angle. So ang na-form daw ay right angle. So ito yung naging effect, yung right angle. So for sure ito ang ating conclusion. At ito ang ating hypothesis, perpendicular lines. So the lines are perpendicular. So it is a sentence. The lines are perpendicular. So that's the hypothesis. So put them in a sentence. Form right angles. So paano kaya yon? The lines form right angles. So nakalagay na siya into conclusion. The lines form right angles. Remember, we are talking about the lines. So usually sinasabi muna yung subject pagkatapos kung ano yung pinaka-thought nung statement. Okay, in if-then statement, so gamitin natin yung hypothesis natin. If the lines are perpendicular, then they form right angles. So that is the if-then statement of perpendicular lines form right angles. So I hope nakuha nyo na po. Let's now have our try this. For letter A, underline the hypothesis and box the conclusion of each given statement. So, pwede nyo na pong pakikopya yung questions natin or yung sentences natin dyan. Tapos, para ma-underline nyo yung hypothesis, tapos ibabox nyo yung conclusion. And then, for number 2, transform each statement into its equivalent if-then statement. Okay? So, good luck! Let's check your answers. Here are the correct answers for try this. Paki 2 points na lang or 2 points each na lang yung letter B. Yung pag-create or pag-construct ng or pag-transform ng if-then statement para maging 10 points. So I hope you got a perfect score of 10, pero kung hindi po, paki-review po kung saan tayo nagkamali. Hindi po dapat naka-underline yung if at saka yung then kasi sabi kanina, hindi sila part ng hypothesis and conclusion. Okay? So I hope you learned something new today. And I also hope to see you again in our next videos. What's up, guys?